All right. Section 8.6, day one notes, central question, how do you solve rational equations? First ones are pretty simple. If it's just a fraction equal to a fraction, just cross multiply and solve. So to cross multiply and solve, you got 3 times 4 parentheses 4x plus 5 equals 9 times parentheses x plus 1. Then you distribute, and you have 12x plus 15 equals 9x plus 9. Then I like to get my variables or do variables first. So I subtract 9x. 12x minus 9x is 3x plus 15 equals 9. Subtract 15 from both sides. And you have 3x equals negative 6. Divide by 3, divide by 3. And x equals negative 2. You can always plug that back in and check it, but it should work. Okay, let's go to the next one. We're going to multiply x minus 2 and x plus 3 together. Let's draw a line and divide this stuff. Oops. Okay, so we have x minus 2 and x plus 3 equals x times x, which is x squared. Okay, we FOIL this. X times x is x squared. 3x minus 2x is 1x. And negative 2 times 3 is negative 6 equals x squared. From here, what I would do is subtract x squared from both sides. So I'd have x minus 6 equals 0. Add 6 to both sides. And x would equal 6. The main thing you need to check for extraneous solutions is if it makes the denominator go to 0. If it doesn't make the denominator go to 0, it's probably a real solution, unless it's a quadratic. But you can plug that in. 6 minus 2 is 4. 4 divided by 6 is 2/3. 6 over 9 reduces down to 2/3 as well, so that does check out. This one you cross multiply, so 3 times 2 is 6. Then you cross multiply these, you got a FOIL, so you have x squared. Actually, let's write that out. So we got x plus 3 and x minus 2. So if we FOIL that, we have 6 equals x squared. Negative 2x plus 3x is 1x. And 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. So now I subtract 6 from both sides. And I'd get 0 equals x squared plus x minus 12. I know it's a little sloppy. Then from there, I'd have to factor it. So I need to find factors of negative 12 to add to 1, which would be 4 and negative 3. So I'd factor into x plus 4 and x minus 3. My answers would be negative 4 and positive 3. Okay, if you plug those back in, let's plug in negative 4 first. Negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. 3 divided by negative 6 would be negative 1/2. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Negative 1 by 2 would be negative 1/2. So we know negative 4 works, then you can plug in 3. Let's plug in 3 real quick. So you have 3 minus 2 is 1. 3 divided by 1 is 3. And you have 3 plus 3 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So it does check out for both of them. Okay, this one, what we have to do is multiply by the least common denominator. Okay, so the least common denominator of x and 4 is 4x. So what we're going to do is multiply every single thing by 4x. Okay, but basically what happens is we cross out what's left over. So like on this one, on the first one, if we do 4x times 5 over x, the x's cancel out. So we have 4 times 5, which is 20. On this one, we have the 4's cancel out, so we just have x times 7, which is 7x. And then on this one, the x's cancel out, so we have negative 9 times 4 is negative 36. From there, it's just a normal algebra problem. We're going to subtract 20 and be 7x equals negative 56 divided by 7, and x equals negative 8. Let's clean that up. Plug that back in and check it. Okay. So if we plug negative 8 back in, we got 5. Let's see, if we plug that back in. Let's see that real quick. Let's see here, clear. Let's see, we plug negative 8 in. We have 5 divided by negative 8 plus 7 divided by 4 would equal that, which as a fraction would be 9/8. And if you put negative 9 divided by negative 8, you get 9/8 as well, so we know it checks out. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, so let's do this one. What's the least common denominator? Very similar is 5x. So multiply both sides by 5x. So we multiply that by 5x. We have 5 times 15, which is 75. Then multiply that by 5x, because the x's cancel out in that one. This one, the 5's cancel out, so we'd have 4x. And if we multiply this one, the x's cancel out, so we have 35. Again, pretty simple problem. Just subtract 75 and divide by 4. And you get 4x equals negative 40, which when you divide by 4, x will equal negative 10. Okay, if you plug negative 10 back in to the calculator and check it, this time we're going to move it this way. Oh, really can't move it. So what was it? 15. Clear that out. Let's go 15 divided by negative 10. And what was that? Plus 4/5. Plus 4/5 equals this fraction, which is negative 7/10. You don't really need the calculator for that. But if you put 7 divided by negative 10, you get negative 7/10 as well. So we know it checks out and it works. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this one a little bit different. We got x, and x minus 5 is going to be our least common denominator. So we're going to multiply everything by x parentheses x minus 5. X parentheses x minus 5. X parentheses x minus 5. Now the first one, nothing's going to cancel out because it's just 1. So 1 times x parentheses x minus 5 is just, well, if we distribute that right there, we have x squared minus 5x. Okay. If we go to the next one, the x minus 5's cancel out. So we have x times negative 8, basically. So x times negative 8 would be negative 8x. I made a mistake on the first time I was doing this and made a positive 8x and messes up your answer. So make sure you count for that minus right there. This one, the x's cancel out. So we have 3 times x minus 5, which will be 3x minus 15. Okay. So we go on. Let's combine like terms on this side. So we got x squared minus 13x equals 3x minus 15. Okay, let's subtract 3x from both sides. And we have x squared minus 16x equals negative 15. Check your equal. Okay, then you want to add 15 to both sides because it's a quadratic. We got to set it equal to 0. And we have x squared minus 16x plus 15 equals 0. Well, it's a quadratic now, so the quickest way to do it is factor it. Factors of 15 to add to negative 16 would be negative 15 and negative 1. because negative 15 times negative 1 is positive 15. Negative 15 plus negative 1 is negative 16. So our two answers will be 15 and positive 1. 15 and positive 1. If you plug those back in, none of those will make the denominator go to 0, so none of them can be extraneous. You can plug them back in and check it. 15 minus 5 is 10, so 1 minus 8 tenths is 2 tenths. Over 3 divided by 15 is 1/5, and 1/5 and 2 tenths are the same thing, so that does check out. Okay, so you know 15 works. If you, let's erase that a little bit so you can see that a little clearer. If you plug in 1, you have 1 minus 5 is negative 4. So you'd have 1 minus 8 divided by negative 4 would be negative 2. So you got 1 divided by negative 2 equals 3 over 1. Well, they're both going to equal 3, so that does check out too. So both of those work. So always plug them back in and check your work, make sure they work. Okay. This one, the first thing you got to do is you need to factor this one. X squared minus 9, you can rewrite as x plus 3 and x minus 3. Okay, and this has x minus 3, this has x plus 3, so our least common denominator is going to be x plus 3 and x minus 3. So that's what we have to multiply everything by. We got to multiply this side by that, by x plus 3 and x minus 3. I know I'm writing kind of up there. And then we got to multiply this whole side by x plus 3 and x minus 3. Because that's the least common denominator. So what crosses out on the first one? Well, on this one, x minus 3 cancels out. So I'm left with 6 times x plus 3. 6 times x is 6x. 6 times 3 is 18. So I got 6x plus 18. On this one, everything cancels out. X plus 3 and x minus 3. Because the least common denominator is all of that. So you just end up with 8x squared. This one, the x plus 3 cancels out. Let's change this. That looks like a minus. X plus 3, x minus 3. Okay. The x plus 3 cancels out. Okay, so, but I got to treat that as a negative 4x. So negative 4x times x would be negative 4x squared. And negative 4x times negative 3 is going to be a positive 12x. Okay, so very careful with those negatives because I messed that up the first time I was doing this. So it's really careful. You have to be really careful about those minuses right there and treating that as a negative. From there, we just need to combine like terms. Next, so 6x plus 18 equals 8x squared minus 4x squared is 4x squared. Plus, that should have been 12x. Negative 4x plus negative 4x times negative 3 is negative 1. So plus 12x. Okay. Next thing we need to do is set it equal to 0. We got our x. Okay, so let's subtract 6x from 12x. And let's subtract 18 from both sides as well. Okay, so when we do that, we get 0 equals 4x squared. 12x minus 6x is 6x. And negative 18. And now we need to factor. So what common factors does 4, 6, and negative 18 have? Well, they have 2. So we factor out a 2, and we end up with 2x squared plus 3x minus 9. Okay. Now, there's a number in front of the x squared, so we have to do the AC method. So factors of negative 18 that add up to 3 would be 6 and negative 3. 6 times negative 3 equals negative 18. 6 plus negative 3 equals positive 3. So that works. So we'd write it out. And actually, real quick, before we even do that, let's divide this 2. This 2 is annoying. We don't really need to solve it. 0 divided by 2 is 0, and those 2's will cancel out. So now we don't even have to worry about that. Okay, so 0 divided by 2 is 0. Okay. And then we can factor this. So we have 2x squared plus 6x minus 3x and minus 9. Okay. And then we need to factor out the greatest. We can group these together, group these two, and group these two. Okay, the greatest common factor of 2x squared and 6x is 2x. So we're left with x plus 3. And the greatest common factor of negative 3x and negative 9, since it leaves with a negative, is negative 3. And we're left with x plus 3 when you divide each of those by negative 3. So when we rewrite this in factor form, we'd have 0 equals 2x minus 3 and x plus 3. So what are our answers? Well, this one's easy to find. This answer is x equals negative 3 as one of our answers. The other one's a little bit tougher to find. We need to set that equal to 0 and solve it. Add 3, divide by 2. And we get 3 halves. So x equals 3 halves. Okay. Now, on this one, those are our two answers. So x equals negative 3 and x equals 3 halves. Okay. What you should notice, or what you need to be able to notice, let's erase some of this stuff because we have a lot going on here. Let's go back to the original problem. Okay. Let's look at this. Let's look at one easy that's really easy to see. Negative 3. X equals negative 3. If I put negative 3 in for x here, I have negative 3 plus 3, which is 0. Then I'm dividing by 0, which I cannot do. So since I'm dividing by 0, that is how you check for an extraneous solution. Okay. Negative 3 does not work, so therefore you must cross it out. And if you put that as an answer on a test, I have to count points off because you did not check for extraneous solutions. If it makes the denominator go to 0, it's an extraneous solution. It would also be an extraneous solution here because negative 3 squared is 9 and 9 minus 9 is 0. But 3 halves, we can plug in 3 halves and see if that works. It would take a little bit longer. That might be something we check in class just because it'll take a lot longer and I'm running out of room here. But 3 halves should work because you see from it, you can see right away it doesn't. If you plug 3 halves in for x, it doesn't cancel anything out and make it go to 0 and divide by 0. So we can check that in class, see if it works. But for right now, let's just say that that is our answer. Okay, 3 halves. Let's write that a little bit clearer. Okay. All right, what would be the least common denominator of 2x and x plus 1? Well, just slap them together. 2 parentheses x plus 1. So let's multiply this side. Well, check that. Let's multiply the whole left side by 2x parentheses x plus 1. And let's multiply this side by 2x parentheses x plus 1. So if we multiply this side by 2x parentheses x plus 1, the x plus 1 cancels out, so we end up with 2x times 3x, which is 6x squared. We multiply this by 2x, the 2x's cancel out, so let's cancel those out real quick. 2x, 2x. So we have negative 5 times x, which is negative 5x. And we have negative 5 times 1, which is negative 5. Make sure you account for that negative right there.
Daddy? Daddy?
Hold on a second, Ray. All right, so on this side, the 2x's cancel out. So we just have 3 times x, which is 3x. And we'd have 3 times 1, which is 3. Okay, from there, it's just about, it's a quadratic. So we got to set equal to 0. So we got to subtract 3x. And we got to subtract 3. So we subtract 3x and we subtract 3, and we end up with 6x squared minus 8x minus 8 equals 0. What's the least common denominator of 6, 8, and 8? It's just 2. So we factor out a 2, and we have 3x squared. 3x squared minus 4x minus 4 equals 0. We can divide by 2, so we don't have to deal with that. 0 divided by 2 is 0, so that would cancel out. We don't even need to worry about that. So we'd have 3x squared minus 4x minus 4 equals 0. Okay, again, there's an a in front, there's a number in front of the x squared, so we got to do the AC method. So we got to do factors of 3 times negative 4, which is negative 12, that add up to negative 4, which we should know is negative 6. No, negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. So how we have to rewrite that is 3x squared so I have 3x squared minus 6x plus 2x. And what was the last number? Minus 4 equals 0. So then we got to group them. Take out a greatest common factor. Greatest common factor, this one's 3x. We take out 3x, and we're left with x minus 2. Take out a 2, and we're left with x minus 2. So our answer is going to be 3x plus 2 and x minus 2. So our two answers, one's going to be easy to find. Well, let's solve this one first. 3x plus 2 equals 0. So we got to subtract 2. And divide by 3. So x equals negative 2/3 is one of our answers. Okay, and our other answer, what makes x minus 2 go to 0 is positive 2. Okay, so let's see. Does that make any of these equations go to 0? Well, 2 doesn't. 2 should be good. 6, 3. We can plug in 2 real quick and see if that works. Let's plug in 2 and see if it works. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 divided by 3 is 2 minus, actually that'd be minus 5, 6. Or 5 fourths. Minus 5 fourths equals 3 fourths. Which actually does work. 8 fourths, because 2 is 8 fourths. 8 fourths minus 5 fourths is 3 fourths. That does check out. And you could plug negative 2/3 in. That would take longer again, but it doesn't make any of the denominators go to 0, so I'm going to assume that's not extraneous, but we can check that also in class as well. Okay? Just don't have enough room and enough time to do it on here. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Your steps for this is, let's go back to the first examples. I know there's a lot of these. Example 1, if it's just a fraction equal to a fraction, cross multiply and solve. This is what you did. You've done this in Algebra 1, okay? Just setting up a proportion. If it is a plus or minus attached to it, what you need to do is find the least common denominator, which is usually just the denominator slapped together, okay? Like 4x, 5x, and then multiply everything by that. And you can get rid of what they have in common, and then just multiply what they have left. Cross out what they have in common and multiply what they have left, okay? And then after you do that, you have just a normal, like you'll either have a linear problem you need to solve or a quadratic problem you need to solve. And the main thing is to double check, plug those numbers back in and make sure that they do not make the denominator go to 0. Because if they do make the denominator go to 0, then that's an extraneous solution. So solve this one. If you have any questions, email me, and that is it.